Hi everybody, my name is Katie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm back with another advice video. This is gonna be my how I passed my CPJE on the first try. And yes, I know I've done a lot of these videos recently. It's because I've taken a lot of pharmacy board licensing examinations recently. So this is gonna be the last one of this series because if I ever do take like an MPJE, or if I ever want to get licensed in another state, it's gonna be another MPJE. Which my study techniques will be the exact same as in the MPJE video that I have posted already. It'll just be different, like state specific law that I'm studying. But other than that, exactly same study techniques. So I'll be going over the CPJE though today, which is California's law exam. So first, I just want to go ahead and go into a little bit about me. Also, my notes are in the background. Don't freak out if I'm like not looking directly at you. It's because I'm referencing my notes. I don't want to miss anything that's important, so don't worry about that. But so a little bit about me. I graduated with my PharmD from University of the Pacific in Stockton, California in May 2024. So still this year as this video is going out, with each video that I've been posting getting further and further away. But this is the last licensing exam that I've taken, and I may take, I don't know, but I did move to Oregon to do my PGY1 residency, so that's where I currently am now. I am in Oregon. Hello! So yeah, I'll be talking about the CPJE today. It's 90 questions in 2 hours, so it has no breaks. However, 75 questions actually only count for the exam. So even though it's 90 questions, only 75 count towards your score. 15 are considered pre-test questions, and those pre-test questions are basically questions that help determine if they're going to be implemented on future CPJE exams. So they're like evaluated by the board. They see how well we do on them. They're like, is this appropriate to put on a future CPJE exam? So that's kind of the purpose of those. But 90 questions, technically 75 count. You just don't know which of the 75 count and which 15 don't. So answer all to the best of your ability. And if you don't know something, hope it's one of the 15. But yeah, you must answer every question before moving on. There's no backwards navigation. Sorry, I just hit my table. And I do know that this test is a little daunting. It was for me, as it's commonly deemed like the hardest pharmacy licensure examination. And pass rates are quite low compared to other like pharmacy licensing exams. So hopefully these tips that I provide here help to provide you with guidance and a little bit more confidence so that you can walk in on test day feeling a lot more confident. So as for planning, there wasn't the most amount of planning that went into this, to be quite honest, in comparison to my other exams that I've taken. My CPJE test date was September 24th, and ideally you do want to take your CPJE like 2 weeks-ish after the NAPLEX. But I didn't do that since I'm currently in Oregon, and getting that license was my priority, obviously. So I didn't apply to I didn't apply like to the California Board of Pharmacy for like my application for taking the exams until after I took the NAPLEX. That's because Oregon was my primary state. So I took the MPJE and then I took the NAPLEX, and then afterwards I applied, and then I told them I did the score transfer, and then I took the CPJE. So that's kind of the schedule that I did. Usually, if you're like just freshly out of pharmacy school when you're taking your license exam, you would take the NAPLEX, and then about like 2 weeks later-ish, you would try to take your CPJE. And that's just because with that timing, you won't really forget much of like the clinical knowledge that you studied. Well, you hopefully shouldn't, but it's minimal time to forget that information. And then it is a good amount of time to focus on studying the law. So you'll have like those 2 weeks to study on the law and brush up on any clinical topics that you don't feel as prepared in. So that's kind of like why people recommend 2 weeks. I, however, had almost a 2-month gap, but I'm a little different. But yeah, it's because the CPJE is a very clinical test. So a lot of the concepts from NAPLEX will be applied to CPJE. Anyways, I started studying specifically for the CPJE in August, since my NAPLEX test date was July 31st. However, obviously, I technically was studying before that because I was studying for the NAPLEX. But just for CPJE focused things, I started in August. And then during the time between my NAPLEX and CPJE, I studied California law, and I also reviewed the clinical concepts from the NAPLEX course book. I honestly didn't really have a study schedule like I did for the other 2 exams because it was mainly review. And I just studied California law. So there wasn't really too much of like a study schedule to make, but I knew I wanted to study as much as I could while waiting for the board to approve my application. That was a very gruesome process though. It was very tiring, and I was very tired of studying because I didn't know when my test date would be, but I knew it was going to be soon and that I wanted to get it done. But I did that so that I could take the test ASAP after approval so that I could stop studying because I was so tired of studying. I ended up scheduling my exam a couple days before the test date because I knew like I was ready from studying so much. I think it was like a week or less, like a little less than a week before my test date that I scheduled it for that date. So yeah, I didn't know you could schedule it that early or that soon in advance, but there were still slots available, so that's what I did. Anyways, for resources that I used and how I studied, just like the other 2 videos, the main resource that I used is UWorld. And that's because the school, or my school, did provide us with a 1-year subscription for both NAPLEX and CPJE, since I went to a California school rather than MPJE. I did end up renewing my CPJE subscription since it expired at the beginning of August, unfortunately, and my exam was at the end of September. So it expired like the day after my NAPLEX, and obviously I'm not going to study for my CPJE while I'm studying for my NAPLEX because the NAPLEX was the major priority, so I had to renew it. But I did find the CPJE course book a lot more useful than that for the MPJE because it is state specific. I remember I did talk about that a little bit in my MPJE video, how it's very general and it's not as state specific as I would have liked it to be. But California, obviously CPJE is only for California, so I thought it did a very good job summarizing all the law and made it a lot easier to understand. But yeah. So the subscription comes with the book and then an online component. I totally forgot to get the book when I was going to show you the book. Give me 1 second. It's on the floor over to my right. Okay, the book has been obtained. It's right here. So this is the course book. It's not as big as the NAPLEX course book, obviously, because it's just law. It's about comparable in size to the MPJE course book. But this is what it looks like. So this is the book component, and then there's also an online component. The online component has video lectures, a quiz bank, and a flashcard system. Though, as I've stated in my other videos, I didn't really use UWorld's flashcard system. I instead used Anki, which I will talk about later. But I was trying to be smooth with it and I dropped it. That was my keyboard. Okay. So I did use a different app for flashcards. That's where I left off. But I will say that, though, in my opinion, the test bank questions from UWorld were quite a bit easier than the actual exam. However, I still think it's a great study tool to use to see if you have the concepts down. Because obviously, if you miss a question, you know, like, hey, I don't really know this concept that well. I should probably review it. Although, as for like the difficulty of the exam, I wouldn't say it's that good of a measure, if that makes sense. But once again, if you have watched my other 2 videos on studying for pharmacy license exams, the part that I'm about to explain will be redundant, but when going through each chapter, I read and highlight first, watch the video next to reinforce those concepts, type down my notes, and then I take a practice quiz to see how much I retained. And then as I get further into those chapters, I just incorporate like previous chapters in to make sure that I don't like forget anything and that like I'm actually retaining what I learned. So I do that. And I do want to just clarify that this that I just explained is for the CPJE course only. For NAPLEX, I didn't renew my subscription. I just reviewed my notes that I previously made. So yeah, there was no point in me renewing it. The only point would have been to redo those practice questions, but I saw no benefit in that, so I just didn't renew it. But for the notes that I type, I format them so I can quiz myself and practice active recall without seeing the answers. So as I previously mentioned, I use Notion to organize all my notes. So here is my section for the CPJE. And here you can see the notes that I typed for each chapter. And then here is an example of my notes from chapter 2. So here I could test myself about the supervision requirements of pharmacy staff. So as I scroll through the notes slowly, I review the word interns. And then I could test myself and say, yeah, a pharmacist can supervise 2 interns. And then I would see that I was correct. And then I'd scroll through the rest of my notes in the same fashion, teaching myself on each concept. So as I mentioned, Anki is what I use for my top drugs. It's a flashcard app, free to download on computer and Android phones. However, on Apple phones, it does cost money. I don't know why, but I have it on my Mac and it's totally free. So I use it on my Mac. Personally, I'm fine with that because I prefer studying on my computer than studying on my phone anyways. But what's neat about Anki is it remembers how well you did on a flashcard and determines a frequency to give you back that flashcard based on your previous performance. I cannot stress how important top drugs are for the CPJE. Like, they are so important because if you don't know the drug, you do not know how, you cannot answer the question. CPJE is very notorious for throwing out very weird brand names. Of course, you're not going to know every single brand name, but it's important to try to know as many as you can because they will come up. The questions are generally more straightforward than the NAPLEX. I will say that. It's more of like you either know it or you don't. I feel like the NAPLEX is a lot more like a clinical application exam with like patient cases and such. In some instances, you can kind of reason your way through the patient cases by using good clinical judgment, but the CPJE, it's like you either know it or you either don't. It's like sometimes the questions are as simple as like, insert weird brand name here is used for A, hypertension, B, diabetes, C, dyslipidemia, or D, HIV. And it's like, well, I don't know the brand name. I'm obviously, it's such a simple question, but you don't know the brand name, you're not gonna get it right. But for studying the top drugs, I obviously inputted them into Anki, but how did I get these weird brand names? So obviously I memorized all the ones in the NAPLEX book. This is a great starting point, but knowing all of these will not be enough. There are very generic brand names in there. I feel like ones that you generally should already know for the most part. The next one that I used, or the next resource, is the PNN board review. I'll put a photo on the screen of the book. I don't currently have it because it's not mine. My friend let me borrow it, and I found it really helpful because it had the top drugs organized by indication in a table that also included like high yield information like dosing and side effects and just basically things you should know that are really important, like high yield information about these drugs. So I found that really helpful. And then the third resource, I honestly didn't use too much, but I know a lot of people who have, is the CPJE Secrets. It's also another resource for good clinical summaries, though I did mainly use it just for getting those like weird brand names. Because for the clinical summaries, I mainly use the NAPLEX book and therefore my notes from the NAPLEX book, if that makes sense. But that's pretty much what I did for brands and generics, just repetition every day. I would study them every day. Like brands and generics, I would go through the flashcards every day. And that's kind of what it takes because it's purely just memorization for those. But when studying clinical information, what did I focus on? Because there's a lot of clinical information and it's going to be impossible to know everything. So I focused on like major side effects of drugs. If a drug is notorious for causing a side effect, you better know it. Auxiliary labels, for example, like does the drug need to be refrigerated? Does it need to be protected from light? All of these important things are important to know. Allergies, like if the patient has a sulfa allergy, which can they take of the following drugs? And then like first line treatments for disease states and alternatives. The alternatives could go in like, hey, the patient has a sulfa allergy, or hey, the patient has a G6PD deficiency, or hey, like etc. Like basically the first line treatment is not going to be appropriate. So what can you give instead? Honestly, I didn't really hit dosing that hard. I felt that I would be better off studying the other stuff harder and then just guessing on dosing based off of clinical judgment. And I honestly found that okay. I didn't have that many dosing questions. It might be different from person to person. It also might have helped that I had my pharmacy practice rotation during this time. So I was doing a lot of order verification since I am a pharmacist, or I guess I'm a pharmacist in both states now, but at the time I was only a pharmacist in Oregon. So I was able to do pharmacist things like order verification. So that helped with studying for my CPJE exam because I would constantly see doses, especially for very common drugs. So I will say that did help, but I also didn't really study much math or biostats. Obviously you need to know basic math. like just basic functions that we all already know. I did not rememorize any of the complex formulas that I studied for NAPLEX, and I did not end up needing it. I had little to no math. Maybe the most math you'll have is like calculating like a pseudoephedrine dose or something. I don't know, like to see if they meet or if they exceeded the OTC limits and you're not allowed to prescribe or dispense it. I don't know. But to get a better idea of like the types of questions that may be asked, there is a final resource that I would recommend, and that resource is the practice exam by the board. So this can also be found online, but this is the PSI booklet that they mail to you. Honestly, it's kind of funny because they mailed, I like scheduled my exam so soon, they mailed this to me like a couple days before the exam, but there's an online version. So I use that. It has practice questions. It has 22 practice questions. So it'll help you like see the style, format, and potential types of questions they could ask, along with the answers, of course. But unfortunately, there is no like longer practice exam that shows like a scaled score like those that I was talking about for the NAPLEX and for the MPJE in those videos. Because I found it very helpful to see a scaled score because I knew kind of like where I was in comparison to actual scoring. Like calculating a percentage, it's like, okay, I got an 80%. I don't know what that means though, but I got an 80%. So it's still better than nothing though. And I do think it's really helpful, and it's free. It's already up on the internet. I would recommend taking it. And that leads me into how much I studied. So for the NAPLEX, if you saw my NAPLEX video, you know I studied a lot for it. I studied just under 400 hours. It was like 397 hours, I think. It was like quite literally 400 hours. I say this because NAPLEX studying technically also went towards the CPJE. But if you're just counting like the CPJE for itself, like after the NAPLEX and including both law and clinical content, I spent 110 hours and 39 minutes studying. So I guess if you want to add it together, I guess it's like 511 hours about. It's a lot of hours. That's a lot of hours. I'm insane. And that was in the 110 hours and 39 minutes was in the months of in the months of August to September. This does not mean you have to study this much to pass. Some people may take more time and some people may take less time, and that's totally okay. Everyone works at a different pace, but that's kind of how much I studied, which did lead me to pass, but I don't entirely know if I needed to study that much to pass. So that leads me to my next section, but I'm gonna take some water first because I'm really thirsty. Okay, that leads me to my next section, which is when I got my results and how I got them sooner. So I know this is what people are very curious about. So the board does say it takes 30 to 45 days to receive your results, which may be true if you take it earlier than I did, because all the new grads are like trying to take the exam in the months of like June to August-ish. So I got my results considerably sooner than expected. I did take the exam on September 24th, and I found out I passed on October 10th. So that's like 12 business days and 16 calendar days, I believe. But now I did not get the official letter in the mail in that like time frame. I got the official letter on the 12th, so October 12th, 2 days later. Not that it really matters, because all that matters is like seeing a pass on the score report. But the CPJE does tell you your actual score on the exam, which I thought was interesting, because for the MPJE and NAPLEX, they just say pass, so that's all I was expecting. But hey, that's all that matters. As long as you see pass, no matter if you get like a 75 or a 99, you passed and you're a pharmacist, so that's all that matters. But in case you're wondering, all that studying that I did lead me to get a scaled score of 82 on the exam. You do need a 75 or higher to pass. So yeah, I did find out a little sooner because I use a little hack that only works if you've taken and passed the NAPLEX first. So you should have received a letter from the California Board of Pharmacy that you passed the NAPLEX. And in my case, I received a letter that showed they successfully received my score transfer report since I took the NAPLEX in Oregon. And I labeled Oregon as my primary state of licensure so that I can get my license sooner for Oregon, since residency depends on it. But the hack is to see if you can pay for your license on the California board's website. If you can pay, that means you passed. So instead of typing all of my information constantly into the payment portal, I opted for the easier option. So typically for every exam date, someone makes a Reddit page. Someone is bound to. And so I just kept checking that page to see if and when people were able to pay. And I would check every morning after like the 2-week mark, or maybe like a week and a half mark, actually, to be honest. I was kind of anxious, but I think scores like should come out in the morning. At least that's the trend that I've been seeing. I feel like scores generally come out in the morning. So if they're going to come out that day, it's going to be in the morning. So I wouldn't waste my time checking at like 3 p.m. and then again at like 5 p.m. Like it's not going to happen. But that's the trick. It only works if you did pass the NAPLEX first. But yeah. I hope that helped you get an idea into how to study for the CPJE. At least what worked for me. Honestly, the day before my exam, so my exam was on a Tuesday, so on that Monday, I didn't study. Or I studied a little bit in the morning, I think it was. Just a little bit. And then after that, rest of the day, I didn't study at all. And I think that was a really good idea for like my mental health, because honestly, what more are you gonna learn in one day? Like, you're not gonna cram that much more information in. It's basically up to your performance at that point, like how you actually perform on exam day. So what I did is I took the day off, pretty much enjoyed myself, had a nice dinner and whatever, went to bed early. Please go to bed early, guys. Do not stay up cramming. You need your brain to think. It is a mentally exhausting and brutal exam, even though it's only 2 hours. It does take a lot of brain power, and your brain's gonna need that energy. So go to sleep early, and then it's gonna be okay. You just walk in on test day and you just have confidence, and you're gonna say, I'm gonna rock it. And you're gonna do everything that you can do. Because at that point, there's nothing else you can do but take the exam. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I know that everyone studies differently, so what I mentioned may not work for you. Take it with a grain of salt. But I do hope that it helped. Please leave it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below if you want to. Let's make this a positive environment. And thank you for watching. Good luck with your exams. I'll see you next week for another video. Bye.